So, welcome all of you who have joined us for tonight's second webinar in a series of webinars that we're doing on the campaign to build and program the Septima Clark Learning Center, the brand new Septima Clark Learning Center at the Highlander Research and Education Center in Newmarket, Tennessee. My name is Allyn Maxfield-Steele, and I'm one of the co-executive directors of the Highlander Center. I serve alongside Ashley Wood Henderson, who is also on this call with us, and an amazing staff, including some who are on this call, an amazing board, one of whom is on this call. And I'll introduce them in a little bit. Tonight's webinar is going to feature a handful of things. We're going to give an overview of the plans of the Learning Center, and then we're going to get a little bit into some of the amazing historical materials that we have, and we'll be guided through that very relevant, historically and contemporary relevant materials by Susan Williams, who's on the education team and is our librarian archivist at Highlander. And then we'll give you an update on the campaign itself, where we stand in terms of funds raised and some adjustments that we've made to the campaign, and of course plans, the goal of when we're going to break ground. And then we'll have a special word from the Dr. Margo Okazawa-Rey, who is also Highlander's co-chair of the board of directors. So a couple of housekeeping notes before we really dig in. Another staff person at Highlander, Coy Wakefield, is also on the webinar, and she's technically functioning as the host and doing a lot of the back end stuff. She's gonna keep everybody muted except for folks who are presenting. And we'll have time for questions at the end. And just as a heads up right now, but then I'll also let you know when we get into that moment that we're going to ask that people type their questions into the chat box if you have access to that via the screen. And if you're looking at your screen on Zoom, down at the bottom it says chat in a little speech bubble there. So we're going to ask for folks to enter their questions or comments into that chat box. For folks who are calling in, I want to be reminded, so I'm going to remind myself that we want to create space for folks who are calling in too to ask a question. So we'll hold folks who are calling in for questions after we get a round of chat box questions, should we get those. So let's go ahead and dig into the plans. This is the Septima Clark Learning Center at Highlander. We're really excited about it. If you can go ahead and click to the next screen, Coy. So this is just an overview. This is some of the promotional materials that we have. It just gives you an overview of the purpose, why we're naming it after Septima Clark, who was on staff from 1956 to 1961 as the director of education and the founder, one of the key and core founders of the citizenship school program that started at Highlander, and Susan will give you a little bit more of that in a little bit. But basically, this is an overview of what we're really trying to do here. The Highlander library and archive materials will be hosted in the Learning Center in the top floor, and then a bottom floor will be having a multi-purpose space where we can do art making, a whole range of different kinds of cultural production, but also large meeting space. It'll be our single largest indoor meeting space at Highlander. You can flip to the next page. This just is a range of the materials that we currently have on hand. And so ranging from work around textile labor to insight into the citizenship school program to books that have been published out of Highlander in years past. This is just one snapshot of the range of materials and books and incredible movement resources that we have and that we're preserving and also want to make available to people both physically and digitally through the Learning Center. Flip to the page, next page. This is the mock-up of what it's going to be looking like. So what you see on the left side of your screen, for those who are able to see it, is a basic inside shot of what we're going to be doing. So again, the top floor is going to be the library itself. So we're going to be moving from our old library into the top floor of the Learning Center. And then at the bottom floor, ground floor, built into the side of the hill, is going to be a multi-purpose space with offices, or excuse me, different kinds of spaces for folks to use both privately or in small groups, and then also an open floor space for larger groups. So again, it'll be our single largest indoor space at Highlanders for a lot of different purposes. And then, yeah, so I'm going to kick it to Susan to go ahead and get into a little bit of what we use this for, what we'll hope to use this for. Thanks.
So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We wanted to just sort of share some sort of an example of kind of the materials that we have on site and ways we can share materials and tell stories that can really inspire and connect with work people are doing now. We decided to just talk a little more about the citizenship schools related to voter education organizing, since we're in the midst of midterm elections, voter registration, a looming presidential election, and a lot of groups thinking about how they should be doing political work and how to build voter and organizing bases. The citizenship schools are especially appropriate because the Learning Center is named after Septima, who was a teacher and prime leader for these schools. These pictures you see are from a woman named Ida Berman, who went down and took some amazing pictures of the citizenship schools. The one on the left is the first citizenship schools on Johns Island. Bernice is standing, she was the teacher, and Septima was kind of the educational director. On the right, there were key players on the right. On the left, on the right-hand photo, Esau Jenkins, a community leader who was amazing in many ways, but was really important for getting these schools started. And on his right is Miles Horton from Highlander, who helped support the creation of the citizenship schools. There's sort of short versions of the citizenship schools, but it's actually a very complex story. It's a very collective story, and I consider it a miraculous story. The citizenship schools were designed to help people improve their literacy skills and be able to register to vote. This was Black communities in South Carolina who had to pass a test that had parts of the South Carolina Constitution that was a bar to having them be able to register to vote. There was very high rates of illiteracy on the islands because the education had been so poor and meager that had been sort of distributed out on these kind of isolated islands. So the story, a quick version of the story, Esau Jenkins, a longtime community leader, came to Highlander for a workshop on the UN Declaration of Human Rights in 1954. And he started talking about, he didn't know about this Declaration of Human Rights, but people really needed to be able to read and be able to register to vote for things to change on the island. He himself had been trying to help people learn how to read and register to vote as he was driving them into Charleston to their jobs. He had a van and took people into work. So they talked about this at the workshop, and Highlander agreed to help support the creation of some kind of school to help people learn to read and write and be able to register to vote, but it took 2 years to actually put this in motion. So the first Sea Island school was in 1956. That was very successful. Other teachers were trained to do the workshop in other areas of South Carolina, but then Highlander was closed, the property confiscated by the state, so the program was transferred to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Septima and Bernice still continued working with the program, but the leadership of the program was turned over to Dorothy Cotton and Andrew Young, very important leaders for the spread of the citizenship schools in the SCLC. So that's kind of the basic story, but as I was preparing for this webinar, I was reminded about what a complex story it is. We wanted to share some sort of key important things to know about the citizenship schools, and also some images from the collection that we also would hope that these kind of images and stories can be put together, shared in all kinds of ways that are possible now. So the schools didn't just come out of the blue. Esau Jenkins didn't just come out of the blue. There was strong community ties and leadership that helped support these citizenship schools. So this picture is a picture of the Progressive Club. It was a club that Esau went back and helped start. They didn't just have schools. They also formed a cooperative that was in the front of this store. And they worked on housing, and then on the back you see a little side building and a little kind of extension on the back, and that was built as a place to have the schools, kind of a secret space, because there weren't public places they were allowed to have the schools. So they would have the schools back in the back of the store, but the store also served the community in terms of people having access to groceries and the idea of cooperatives. So the schools were set up by groups, and they were to address immediate needs of literacy, but also community needs of needing people to be able to vote, to have power, and also with a larger vision of changing the situation for Black people in the South, and even a larger vision about the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So these two slides are a couple of images, some images of kind of showing some of those different perspectives. On the left is a photo of a man learning to write his name on a board. On the right is a class, and on the wall is a copy of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which was a new document at that point. So Bernice's goal was that everyone should be able to read that before they finished taking the classes. On the next slide are two other pages from what is like everyone would have have their citizenship booklet, and there's different versions of that. This was one that was done for Tennessee. So on the left-hand side, you see the table of contents. So it runs a gamut from being able to fill out an order, writing a letter, doing simple math, to also talking about how to register to vote. Questions about Social Security. And what is even more amazing to me is that these classes were not a huge amount of time. They were maybe 2 or 3 months in the winter on 2 evenings a week. And in that amount of time, people made such progress that they could register to vote and pass these tests that included words. On the right-hand side is a vocabulary list. Includes words like magistrate and habeas corpus and political, but also words like farm. And so people had to learn this kind of vocabulary that many people now probably could not say what it meant. And then I should be able to quote and answer parts of the South Carolina Constitution in the state. So this is what kind of stuff they were doing in these schools. There was also, Bernice was also teaching young women how to sew or do crochet. So when we talk about the schools, they had many layers to them, I think. Another layer is that culture was very important. Culture is important in communities. Highlander believes in the importance of culture, and the Sea Islands in particular had this Gullah culture derived directly from Africa, and the islands were isolated, so this culture developed and stayed very strong, and song and singing was a really important part of that culture, part of the worship. And so this is a picture of a song, Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. Mrs. Alice Mine was one of the first students at the Johns Island School. She learned to read, she registered to vote, she worked in the cooperative, and she shared this song with Guy Carawan, who was down in Sea Islands to help support the citizenship schools on behalf of Highlander. And he gathered songs from different people, and actually many of these songs were shared with other leaders of the Civil Rights Movement and became songs of the Civil Rights Movement. So Keep Your Eyes on the Prize is a very common song to hear and see in civil rights settings. Yeah, the most important thing about this model, they were just starting with their local group. They didn't imagine this would go across the South, but it was successful and people heard about it. People in local islands asked to have them come and do some classes, so they did it on Wadmalaw, Edisto Island. Later in this 1960, Highlander voted to help start schools in Savannah and Huntsville. And Septima led a teacher training at Highlander, and this is a page from the front page of the workshop design for how to train the teachers. And I have to say, holding these pages in your hand and hearing this story makes you really feel so, it makes chills go down my back. So that's why we really want these materials to be more available to people. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference took the program when Highlander was closed. So they took the program. Bernice and Septima worked with SCLC. Bernice was kind of working with Highlander on the citizenship schools. And then teacher trainings were done at the Dorchester Center in Georgia. So over a period of time, hundreds of people were trained as teachers, and a large number of African Americans registered to vote. And we're also pulled into leadership and strengthening the community base. The other thing that I started thinking about, which I kind of knew but hadn't quite put together how much this was going on in so many different ways, was that the schools and the civil rights movement were growing despite incredible harassment, conflicts, and major threats. And for Highlander, actually being closed and losing the land. So Septima had lost her job as a teacher for joining the NAACP early in the 50s. The Johns Island people had to really build a place that was hidden to be able to do schools for literacy. There were attacks of Highlander. What you see the pictures of is from a broadside that was sent out all across the South after the 25th anniversary of Highlander. A spy was sent to take pictures for the Georgia Commission on Education, and he took pictures, and you see that the largest picture is a white woman and a black man square dancing. But it talks about Highlander being a communist training school, and these pictures and these images dogged Highlander and dogged Martin Luther King. There were billboards across the South. There was internal conflicts at Highlander. Miles and Bernice and Septima had some serious conflicts and divisions. They were not really asked about the changes in their situation. Miles's wife died during this time, and many more things were happening that we probably don't even know. But that makes it even more miraculous that this all happened, I think, to understand these conditions. So I just, so that's really just some pieces about this story. And I think our idea is that there's ways that we can connect materials that are at different archives. So there's materials at Avery Center at the College of Charleston, Wisconsin Historical Society, Highlander Center. And if there's ways to sort of gather materials together and be able to share these and tell the story in a deeper way, and also get people interested to learn more, I think that's some of our ideas about what we can do at Highlander and also online and with educational materials. I did this slide to just sort of give people a sense of resources. If you'd like to know more about the citizenship schools, there's a list of books that have really good sections, I think, and cover different particular pieces. I would especially recommend Freedom's Teacher by Kat Sharon. It goes really into depth about Septima and to a lot of depth about the citizenship schools and the dynamics of them. So, and we wanted to also bring this back to the present and the future. We are hopeful that people doing voter registration and education can think about these things and think about how does their work mirror this, or could it be stronger, or how do we really build voter registration to help build a base over a long period of time and not just for any particular election. But we also wanted to share that we have current work going on, and we have a curriculum called Mapping Our Futures, which is to help people think about economics and governance. And the link to that curriculum is also online. We have things available for that. So that's, I kind of went down the rabbit hole as I was thinking about this. I tried to sort of summate with things that I thought were really important, but I hope you all will learn more about the citizenship schools. I hope that you will help come to Highlander and learn more, and also help us think about ways to tell these stories and share information, and let us know the kind of things that you think would be really great to be able to see and touch and share with other people. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for that. And for folks who might have questions about anything that they just saw or heard, please hold those for just a little bit as we give a little bit more information. So wanted to give an update on where the campaign stands currently. You see a slide that has some specific numbers. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're at with even more specifics. So we adjusted the original goal of the campaign for $675,000, which was both for the building and 2 years initial programming. We adjusted that from $675,000 to $775,000, and that basically was to be able to build an elevator into this 2-story structure, while also adding fire suppression in the event of something that tragic, so that we could protect our people and so that we could protect these materials. So we wanted to add that after the original plans, and that has brought us up to $775,000 as a total goal. Where we stand now, though, as you can see, we're at $464,798 cents and some change as of September 1st. So we've had some matriculate in, but we have to go through the system to record some of that. But we're 60% of our way toward the goal. That came on top of a seed gift of $250,000 from an anonymous donor. And then also we received a request of just over $150,000 from a longtime friend of Highlander who happened to be an academic. And so in thinking about our goal of this campaign is including academics, archivists, librarians, we designated that gift to this campaign as well. From the current campaign, since we launched it back in May rather, we are standing at $60,535,000 in some change of what has been raised by our various leaders and captains and generous contributors who we invited to be a part of this campaign. So I'm going to kick it, though, to Dr. Margo Okazawa-Rey, co-chair of the Highlander Board of Directors, for a special message.
And this message is to all my academic and librarian friends and their friends. What we're looking for now are more captains. Somebody on our call right now, Anna DiStefano, is my colleague at Fielding. She's a captain. And the military term notwithstanding, what we are hoping that we can identify 200 individuals who can either give or get $2,000 each, right? That means we academics and librarians will have raised $200,000 toward that goal. And I think given the scope of the academic network that Highlander is connected to and the ways that many of us have benefited, whether we've published books about Highlander or we've taken students to Highlander, educators and librarians have a special connection. And so we're really calling on you all on this call, but also others who you know who might be really good at getting or giving $2,000. And so if you know any of those people, please contact Allyn. I just want to say one thing that's related to what Susan, you talked about, the Sea Islands, Septima Clark. I was just in Japan, and somebody there told me how she used to take her students from a Japanese university to visit Highlander, and she took them to the Sea Islands. And I think on one occasion, you know, they were able to meet some of the people who were named in the slides. So Highlander's reach is really, really broad. And so I'm asking you all to help us identify a few more captains. We have some, they're already doing some of the work. We'll be following up with them. And we can use other captains. So if you're interested, come on, colleagues. Let's get on the bandwagon. Thank you, Allyn. Over to you. Back over to you.
Thank you. And as you can see in the chat box, Ashley Henderson, my co-executive director, just typed my email address into the chat box. And now I'd like to turn it over to folks who are on the call. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. And then we'll also create some space for folks who might be calling in and not on a computer. Someone on an earlier call that we had, or earlier webinar, one of our first one rather, asked what the, you know, in terms of where we stand and in terms of timing on this. Our big goal is to make sure that by the end of 2018, we've reached the total that we need to do for the actual building and breaking ground. Our goal being to break ground in the spring of 2019, so closer to April. And thank you, Alethea, for stepping up to be a captain. That's amazing. We'll be in touch. And then Anna asks, have we thought about contacting the American Library Association? That's a great ask. We have reached out and are in preparation to reach out to different publishing houses that have published books about Highlander or that are really good friends of Highlander in different kinds of ways. But that's a really good, I just had a conversation earlier today about library associations. I think that's a really good thing to flag. So thank you. We'll definitely flag that. If you know anybody or have any contacts in that world, that'd be great to have those contacts. And you can send them to my email address. Good. Any other questions? Maybe if there's someone's on the phone but not on a screen, if you had a question, we can maybe unmute everybody for a second, Coy, just so that people who are on that phone could get an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Allyn, that, you know, sometimes, you know, that little getting on the bandwagon idea, you know, maybe if our captains are willing to be named publicly, maybe we can say, you know, look who's on this bandwagon and get your friends to join, right? So just on this call, we could say, Alethea just became a captain. You know, anybody who knows Alethea, get on the bandwagon. And, you know, way to engage more captains.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Anna also,
you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, also naming publicly. And yes, definitely the deep hope of expanding the kind of education and popular education that the citizenship schools did and have led to. But also the idea of programming that the library will do. Susan has been working really intentionally and intently on developing out the program for the next couple of years, because we already have a library. We're just moving stuff to the new building. So the library and archival work is an ongoing thing. So Susan, if there's any other insights that you have right now about programming that you're kicking off?
Well, one thing is just sort of securing the materials, getting them safe, emptying the closets of the library, which any archivist could sympathize with. We're a couple things. One big thing we want to try to do is get more materials digitized and kind of the stories narrated and get them out, because there aren't huge amounts of Highlander materials that are digitized, and we want to work with other archives that have materials to do that cooperatively. So I think that's a really important thing. We've been talking to some people. There's some people who are public historians up in Louisville who are interested in gathering stories from people who've been part of Highlander and sharing that back sort of to help tell the story. So I think that would be really cool. And then we're working with the education team to talk about current work, what kind of research is needed, what kind of materials, what kind of resources we can be. And we'll also be, just to say, people come to Highlander all the time, and this space will be a resource for them as they come. And some of the stuff that we try to do, we haven't been using our library building and bringing groups, but some of what we do is share books, share materials, sell them, but also try to help people connect from their own communities and their own histories to help them think more about what is the history of struggle from where they're from, and try to share some stories with them, because the stories are so invisibilized or oppressed. And it's really important to try to make the links to, because a lot of what is important about Highlander didn't happen at Highlander. It's what people did when they were home. And so those stories, I think, are really critical to help get documented and encourage people to sort of dig those out of the black history, dig out the real black history and the real history of people in Appalachia and the South. So there's lots of opportunities, more than we can actually do all at once, but looking for partners and interns and fellows in ways we can sort of amplify, I think is definitely all possible.
So the last question, and then we'll wrap it up, is from Alethea. Does anyone know a source that illuminates this grassroots history of the UN Declaration of Human Rights? That piece of the link to citizenship schools is also really fascinating. I don't have a clarity on that. Susan, have you heard anything, or anybody else on the call?
Well, you know, my theory about why there was a workshop at Highlander about that was because Eleanor Roosevelt came to Highlander and was a supporter. I don't know if that's exactly true. But she actually came for the 25th, and she'd given donations, and she was a big supporter of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So I've had that in my mind. I can't say that I may have made that up.
And ever the more important reason for there to be an incredible learning center that houses our library and archival materials, so that people who really want to dig into that can either find those materials at Highlander if they happen to be there, or access them through the various ways that will be connecting people to other kind of movement stories and movement spaces. So thank you for everyone who joined this webinar tonight. It is going to be recorded, and if people want a copy of that recording, we'll definitely send it out to folks through the emails that were part of your registration, and then make it available on our website and Facebook, including the previous webinar we did. And heads up, we're going to hope to do another one in November and another one in December with different focus topics that Susan and others will be contributing to. So this isn't the last time you'll see this, and then also the bigger vision is to incorporate this into programming as a whole. Thank you again. I'll be in touch with people who signed up, and also encourage you to email me at Allyn, A-L-L-Y-N, at highlandercenter.org if you want to get involved or know of folks who might want to get involved. And thank you so much, particularly in this season, for being a part of this. Really grateful to have you on with us tonight.
Yep, indeed. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Love ya.
Love you too.
Love you back.
Love you all.
Love you all.
It's all about love.